word means per 100. And remember what I told you in class, that actual symbol morphed from meaning out of, a division sign and 100. That division sign then became kind of slanty. We dropped the 1 eventually, then eventually the 0 went on the top and at the bottom. But percent just means out of 100. So that's always important to remember. Whenever I have 12% or any number like that, you want to remember that just means 12 out of 100. Or, in decimal land, 0.12. 7%. Heck, that just means 7 out of 100. Or, if you divide that, your decimal would be 0.07. Percents, of course, can get tricky when they show up in word problems. But we go back to just our translating from word to word into math symbols. Okay? There are lots of different ways to do these percent problems, but I like just translating them. So let me show you one the heck I'm talking about. For example, if I said 12% of 200 is what? Again, lots of ways to do this, but I like just translating from English to math. Let's do it. 12%, 12 out of 100. Of in math land often means multiply. 200 is equals what? That's what I'm trying to find. That's my unknown. That's my x. Now, for those of you who are a little nervous with multiplying fractions, you can go ahead and put that in your calculator. 12 divided by 100 times 200 equals what? Okay? Of course, for those of you who are okay with fractions, you multiply the top times the top and the bottom times the bottom. And when you divide and simplify, you end up getting 24. Let's see if that makes sense. 12% of 200 is 24. That makes sense. 12% is not a big chunk of something. It's a little more than 10%. So 24 seems like a reasonable answer. So you see how I just translated word for word. Let's try another one. I'm into a 12 these days. 12 out of, I don't know, 60 is what percent? Well, let's translate again. 12 out of, what does that mean? You're right, division. 12 out of 60, I'm just translating, is, there's your equal sign, what percent? Well, I can write x percent if I like. 12 over 60, that's 12 divided by 60. If you want, you can pick up your handy-dandy little calculator, okay? And that's going to give you 1/5, or if you use your calculator, 0.2 equals x percent. Okay, 0.2. How do I turn 0.2 now into a percent? Oh, well, that's going to mean %. Because x percent, what I want to do is now I multiply things by 100 to turn that into a percent. That was a little funny, but does that make sense? So 0.2 in decimal land, of course, is 20% in percent land. I always like checking to see if that makes sense. 12 out of 60, that seems about 20%, right? 12 is not a huge chunk of 60. It's less than half, certainly. So that seems reasonable. All right. What if I say that something's on sale? Let's say I'm buying a watch. It's originally $150, but is on sale. Let's say it's 20% off. Find the sale price. Okay. Let's translate. The watch is $150, but it's on sale for 20% off. Aren't I really finding 20% of 150? Don't I first need to find 20% of 150? And that's going to be my discount, how much I'm saving. Well, let's go ahead and do that. And again, there are lots of ways to do it. Let's do it the way we just talked about, 20% of times 150. That's going to be your discount. Okay? Now, those of you out there are thinking, wait, 20%, I can do that. Remember our little trick? 10% would be $15. 20% then would be twice that, or $30. So when you actually do this, you are going to get $30. That's what 20% of 150 is. But I'm not done, because you have to go back there and say, oh, find the sale price. That's how much I'm saving. So how much am I actually spending? Well, it was originally $150. I'm saving $30. So I am spending $120. Okay? Now, if this is a multiple choice problem on that midterm, you better believe that 30 is one of the choices for multiple choice. They like to trick you. Isn't that horrible? So always make sure you go back and reread the question. Make sure you're make sure you're answering what the question is asking. Now, some of you might be thinking, wait, isn't there a shortcut for that? Can't I do that in one step? You can. Some of you might be thinking, wait, if it's 20% off, that means I'm paying 80%. So you're paying 80% of $150, right? If you're saving 20%, you're paying 80%. So this is another method. I hope you guys can see this way up here. Another method is to say, wait, 80% of 150, well, that would be 80% times 150. And I think you will find that if you put that in your calculator, you'll get your answer right off the bat. Okay? So that's percent. Now, we also talked about percent change, like percent growth, percent decrease. So let's talk about that briefly. If I have something and it's changed over time, I often like to know the percent of change. So let's say I had a population of birds, okay? And who came to my bird feeder. Let's say at the beginning of the month we started with 20 birds. Okay? Now there are, I don't know, 35 birds at my bird feeder. By what percent did that bird population grow? In other words, what is the percent of the increase in the number of birds at my bird feeder? I want to know what that changes in percent land. Well, first of all, I have to figure out what the increase in birds was. How many more birds are at my bird feeder? Well, let's see. I started with 35. I started with 20. Now I have 35. So I'm just going to subtract and say, oh, I have 15 more birds than I started with. Okay? So now I want to see 15 is what percent of my original amount. So I'm going to say, okay, well 15 out of my original number of birds, what percent is that? Well, I can say 15 divided by 20. If I want to turn it into percent, I can multiply that by 100%. And that's going to give me my percentage change. 15 out of 20. Wow, that's a pretty big percent change. I think you will find that you're going to get 75% as an answer. That means 75% increase. I started with 20 birds. I have 35 birds. That represents a 75% increase in the number of birds. Now, if I had a decrease, I would have done it the same way. Whenever you want to find a percent change, either an increase or a decrease, you first have to see by how much it changed. How much did it go up, or how much did it go down? You then divide it by your original amount. In this case, by the original number of birds. That's going to produce a fraction, or a decimal. And you can turn that decimal into a percent by multiplying it by 100%. That's both for a percent increase and a percent decrease. That wasn't too bad, was it?